Hi, my name is Kelle Sparta. I'm a transformational shaman and a spiritual business coach. That means that I work with high achieving individuals and entrepreneurs who are looking to up level themselves, their businesses, and their human potential. And I do this by helping them to combine the personal growth work along with the energetic work to create solid transformation.
Kelly, thank you. And thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to hear your story. Just before we started recording, you mentioned that it is super important for people to do the inner work because a lot of the time they think, you know what, I understand it mentally. So therefore I'm okay. I don't need to do the work. I get it. And that's not true, right?
No, well, so here's the thing. People come in, so there are stages of personal evolution, right? And typically people come into the door of any sort of spiritual practice, and they're coming in because they started with the question of there's got to be more to life than this, right? And from there, they go into what I call the discovery phase. And that discovery phase is where they go looking for an answer. That's what brings them into the spiritual world. And then they go into, this question of, well, does this stuff actually work? And they go take workshops and they do things and they go, holy crap, this stuff actually works. I must tell everyone I know and drag them out to classes with me so they don't think I'm nuts, right? And so they go into this consumption phase of consuming as much content as humanly possible. And this takes you into sort of a spiritual addiction almost, because they're trying to orient and figure out where things are and whatever, but they end up going down these rabbit holes. Ooh, angels, ooh, tarot cards, ooh, crystals, and they get lost for like 2 to 5 years in their process by going down the bright and shiny, right? And when you do that, you forget that you came into the process because you weren't happy, right? And so I actually designed my Spirit Sherpa podcast around that space to shorten that distance of 2 to 5 years to like 10 to 15 episodes, because it's crazy. I just see people lose so much time in that space. And the next stage after that is well, great, this works for other people, but does it work for me? Can I prove to myself that I can do it too? And that's usually where people come and start working with me. And you were saying before, does it matter if they do their personal growth work? And this is the stage. It's like, yes. And so stage 3 is, can it work for me? But to get to stage 4, you have to surmount the big limiting belief, which is, I'm looking for the magic pill that will fix me. And it must be outside of myself. If I read enough books, if I look at enough things, if I take enough classes, if I watch enough videos, if I consume enough content, I will find the magic pill. And the answer to that is no, it is not outside of you. The magic pill is you, right? And the answer to that is that your personal power and your ability to do this stuff is going to be limited by your ability to overcome those limiting beliefs. So yes, your ability to be powerful in the world is limited by your ability to do your personal growth work and pull out those limiting beliefs, because otherwise you're going to be like, oh, little me, I can't be that powerful. Or, oh, if I'm this powerful, then I'm responsible for everyone and everything. So maybe I won't give myself permission to do that. Or, oh, look, I proved that I was powerful and I scared the crap out of myself. What could I do with that? Oh my God, right? Or, oh, I don't deserve to have these things. There's all these limiting beliefs that get in the way of you actually being able to stand in your magic and your power. And so that's why we do the personal growth work. Not to mention it makes us feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you've broken it down into the steps, because that is pretty much how it works. I know a lot of people that are in the spiritual business struggle to ask for money. They struggle to make ends meet. Is that a thing? Did they start off with a struggle, find spirituality, and then think spirituality would fix the struggle? Do you think? Or
That has not been my experience. I have seen people come from a job where in the early 90s they were making 120 a year, which is a lot of money now. And they had $1 million in the bank, so they had no problems with money. And then they stepped into the spiritual world and tanked everything.
Yeah.
And, I
So
think
what is that?
Well, so first off, the morphic field of spirituality is mushed together with the morphic field of all the other spiritualities out there. And many of them are based on vows of chastity and poverty. And the chastity isn't relevant, but poverty definitely is, right? And so when you're stepping into the spiritual realm, you're being mixed in with monks and nuns and all of that other energy. And you have to be able to transcend that energy to be able to step yourself out of it, to be able to bring in the cash that you need to bring in, right? And that you want to bring in. You have a right to want to bring it in, right? Let's go there too. The thing that I will say that usually people start with that they bring into the work with them is a codependency. A lot of the people in spirituality come from codependent backgrounds, and they're like, well, they can't afford it, so I won't charge that much. And, they're running a charity, not a business, right? And part of it is also their value, right? They don't see the value in what they do, and therefore they can't ask for the money. Sometimes it's also that they're sitting waiting for validation. They're like, oh, well, I'm going to do this for you and you're going to validate me with money. Well, you can get paid in money or you can get paid in validation. But if you want to split the difference, you're going to get paid a lot less, right, in the cash. And so, because people won't give you both because that's an imbalance in the books, right? So there's lots of things that get in the way of spiritual entrepreneurs and how they deal with their money and how they do their pricing. And a lot of them don't think about how to actually create an offer. They don't do any marketing research. They just want to come in and do their spiritual work, and they don't want to have to market. They feel like marketing is dirty and asking for money is not okay. There's actually a big spiritual belief structure in there somewhere that says that you shouldn't charge for spiritual services, which I think is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. It's like everybody charges for everything. Just because your gift is in spirituality, you should be poor? I don't think so. That's not fair, right? So there's all kinds of pieces and parts that go into this. And then individuals have their own individual things that could be ancestral line issues. It could be past life issues. All sorts of stuff can come up when you're dealing with issues around money.
So you help people to make more money doing their spiritual business. What are the things that they need to look at to change? And you say you could do it within a few episodes. Is that possible?
So the few episodes is to get people to understand they have to look inside of themselves. So that's a different piece of the puzzle. But the pieces around being able to get past what you need to get past to do this, it's very complex and it's individually based, right? So some of it's you got a bad offer. You have an offer that's poorly defined. You can't even tell people what they get out of it, but you just know they get good stuff and you can't really say what it is. And, that sort of thing that I can walk people through. I do a spiritual business consultation. I can walk people through that. We can get through that and get a real grip on what it is that they actually do, because I'm going to tap into the energetic field and figure out what it is that they're saying that they can't put words to. And I will put words to it for them because that's what I do. And so that's a pretty easy fix, is to be able to define what you do. From there, then the pricing issues and the value issues and the business structure, and that takes a little bit more time, right? So it just depends on what issue the person is having. If they're just having a pricing issue, if they've got tons of business coming in the door and they know they're undercharging, but they can't bring themselves to charge more, that is a quick fix. That is we'll come in, we'll do a single session, quick fix, done, move on, you're good to go, right? But it just depends on the situation.
You mentioned you could tap into their field. How do you do that?
So when someone is talking about what they do for people, they automatically bring into mind how they're doing it. and that brings it into their energy field. And since I'm an empath, I read their energy field and I just follow it to what they're doing. And then I look at the energetics of what they're doing. And then I look at how that's impacting the client. And then I can put some language to it.
Why do you think they have such trouble with that, to verbalize it? Because you're not the first person to say this. I've heard it a few times.
Yeah. So the challenge is, for one, they're not really clear what they're doing about half the time. They're feeling their way through. They kind of they know they're kind of going in this direction and they're kind of doing this, and they're like, well, every person's outcome is a little different, and you know, a lot of it is custom, because that's what we do in the energetic realm, is that it's all custom, right? We don't cookie cutter anything, right? And at least not once you've gotten to a certain level of competency, right? And so, you know, because it's custom, it's hard for them to language, because it's different for every person, right? But, you know, you're hearing me talk, and what I do is custom for people, but I'm like, okay, so in this scenario, it's this. In that scenario, it's that. This is the way we do it, da, 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 da. I can very clearly define some very specific things that people can say, oh, that might be relevant to me. And that's the part they're missing, is they're missing the ability to clearly define the outcomes that they're creating, and to give examples, even if it's not the same for every person, but to be able to give examples of how that is impacting and what is the purpose of the work that they're doing, so that people can not only hire you, but refer you.
Do you find a lot that they're trying to sell too much instead of choosing a specific niche?
Always. They're always trying. They're like, well, I could do anything for anyone. I'm like, oh, no, pick something. Right? The best piece of advice I ever received in my career, because I am the queen of doing too much. Okay. I've been there. The best piece of advice I ever got was from Taki Moore. And he said, do one signature program to one target market using one lead magnet in one platform for 1 year. And that made the difference, because what happens is when something doesn't work immediately, they will go into what I call the panic pivot. And it's like, oh no, somebody didn't buy within 2 weeks. The universe must not approve. I must pivot and do something completely different. That'll take me 6 weeks to get ready. And then I'll have to launch it again, and I'll give it 2 weeks, and I'll try again. And then if that doesn't, it's this horrible cycle, right? It's like they're treating the universe as a parent rather than a partner. And so they're waiting for the stamp of approval, instead of looking at the universe and going, it's done, bring it. Right. And that there's a difference to that energy than going, does anybody want it? Right. That energetic difference is the difference between people buying and not buying. Right. Yeah. But they don't understand the energetics behind the business piece. And so they're panic pivoting because, one, they can do a ton of things and they don't know which one to do, because they're looking outside of themselves for the answer rather than inside of themselves for the answer. And two, they don't give it any time once they've launched it to actually be successful. And then they're just like, oh, I got to do something else. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Do you also think it's got to do with the fact that spiritual workers traditionally were go to the stake, stoned to death, so they don't want to be seen, which would be a reason why they don't want to market. They don't want to be on social media. They don't want their face being shown. They don't want to be shouting from the rooftops, because last time that got them killed.
Yes, that I see that a lot. I see a lot of that. There is, and I have a quick answer for that. Do you want it?
Yeah.
You got to die somehow. Nobody gets off the planet alive. So while it's unlikely you will be killed for your gifts in this life, you will die. So, might as well do what you are passionate about.
I love that. You know what? Go to the worst case scenario, because that way, okay, you've gone there. So yes, there's a possibility, but is there a probability? No.
Yeah. Highly unlikely. And if it happens again, well, you did it once before, you could do it again. I had a client who could not for the life of her. I mean, she put all this work into a website, and she was just sitting there, and the website was done for weeks. She just could not get herself to hit the publish button. And she came to me and she's like, I don't know. I can't get it to happen. And I said, well, you were killed in a past life pretty horrifically. Like, she's like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, they hung you badly. And she said, yeah, my neck still hurts in this life. And I'm like, yeah. So I did a little look for her into the timelines. And I said, look, the likelihood that you're going to get killed for your gifts in this lifetime is minuscule. There is like one instance in which that could happen. And if it did, it would be with a gun, not with hanging. And she said, oh, I wouldn't have to get hung. Okay, I can do it. And she hit publish immediately. I just had to take the hanging off the table. That's all it was. So, this is, it's just, that's how it is, right?
But yeah, I hear that a lot. I really hear that a lot. And people that they've got books. I've got a friend who's got a book on Kindle, but she hasn't found a way to publish the cover. It's been there for a year already.
Wow.
And she's hand-drawn all these beautiful pictures. She's put entire courses together. She's got people coming to her house, but she cannot publish that book.
Yeah. Tell her she has to die somehow.
So is it necessary for them to know how they died? Or if they don't have somebody like you to speak to, should they just go to their own worst case scenario and say, that's the worst thing that could happen, and so what?
Right. Yeah. You do not have to know how you died. No, it is not required. Now, sometimes things are a little more complex. So like I work with people who aren't just spiritual entrepreneurs. I work with entrepreneurs in general. And I have a client who's a marketer. And he was having this boom and bust cycle in his business. He would get to a certain level of income and then he would just walk away from his business for a bit so that it would calm down, right? And he would come back down and then he would panic and work his way back up again. And he was like, I cannot get myself to work when I get up to those high levels. And I said, okay. And so we looked and it was a past life issue. He had gotten so successful in his private career way back in a past life. And the king had noticed him as a wealthy merchant. And the king had brought him up into the court and made him world famous. And then he fell out of favor with the king through no fault of his own. The king was just capricious, right? And the king just threw him out of court and he was ruined. He had no business at all. The king had thrown him out and blackballed him, and his family was destitute, and he was thrown in prison, and they were sent away, and he never recovered. And so in this life, he was not letting himself get too successful so they wouldn't get noticed.
Yeah.
And so once we identified the pattern, we said, oh, no kings here. We're okay, right? and you can always say no, right? So, and that was all it was required, was recognizing the pattern and understanding where it came from and being able to say, oh, okay. And so whenever he gets into that place where he's like, oh, I don't want to do anymore, he goes, this is not that life. You are not that person. This is not what's going to happen here. And he goes, okay. And then he just keeps going. So, yeah.
How would a person know what their trigger is, or what the self-sabotage pattern is, where it came from?
So the self-sabotage pattern and where it comes from can be quite complex. Because it could be ancestral line issues where you've taken on stuff from your ancestors that is a story that they lived and you're repeating it out of love for your ancestors. It could be a past life issue. It could be a worthiness issue. It could be an internal block of some kind for some of 50,000 reasons. So that is not an easy one to figure out by yourself. It's usually pretty, you got to sit with it and suss it out. But a starter point for it would be to track the patterns and see when it happens. So, just pay attention and just start documenting, right? It's like, oh, well, this happened and then I did that. It's like, okay. And then that happened and I did this. Okay. And then this other thing happened and I did that. Okay. So what are the common themes between those three things that happened? And what are the common themes between the way you've responded? And then what is the common story that is underneath those things? Right. So if there's a common story, if you can see that the story is, oh, I can't be too noticed, or, oh, I can't be too much, or I can't be too, whatever, wealthy, I can't be whatever, then you start to recognize the story. And then you look in your current life and you say, is there anything in my current life that would account for this? Is there a line that my parents used to say all the time, money doesn't grow on trees, or, you don't deserve anything, or you're a terrible person, or whatever, right? And you go looking for that. And if you don't find that, then it's likely an ancestral line issue or a past life issue or something like that. I've had situations where there were entities that were riding somebody that were making life miserable. And so, that's something you really need somebody who can see from the outside, what's going on there. So it just depends on the person, but that's a good starter step.
Yeah, because I am sure that a lot of very amazing people, talented, gifted people, never ever succeeded because of whatever these blocks were, and never got to the root of the problem. Someone like Vincent van Gogh, who's, chopped off his ear and never got noticed until he died.
Yeah, very much. That is absolutely true. I have known many people in my time, because I've been in this world for about 50 years now. My mother raised me in this movement. So, there are many talented people that I have known along the way who never got noticed.
And that's it. Or maybe that's their path. And do you think that there is such a thing as, I've chosen this lifetime not to succeed?
I think that's not generally the sort of thing that I see. It wouldn't be from that perspective. It would be something like, I've chosen this lifetime to just be here now and not to strive and strive and strive, right? And so the be here now is a different experience of life than the striving for more. And so, that I can absolutely see, but I'm choosing not to be successful. I mean, yeah, you could, but the reason I'm hesitating to say this, let me be very clear, why I'm like hemming and hawing about it, is because yes, absolutely, it is a possibility that somebody could choose that. It is much more likely that if I say that out loud, that somebody's going to use it as an excuse to not get over their crap, right? And so I'm like,
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I was thinking that if somebody was not meant to have it, then they are the people that wouldn't be drawn to listen to something like this.
Correct.
They would be the ones that are not willing to do the work.
Right. Yeah.
So you've been practicing spirituality since a very young age. So
yes.
How was that, having a mom that was spiritual? Because I think 50 years ago that was just woo-woo, like real woo-woo.
Yeah, it was. Let's put it this way. I saw a couple that knew my mom at my dad's funeral, and they were like, oh yeah, we knew your mom back when I was like 4, right? And they said she was a free spirit, which is Southern for crackpot, right? And it was in the 70s, which is when I was growing up, you did not say you were doing this stuff unless you were a serious devotee of it. So in many ways, I feel like I had it both easier and harder than people do now. And the reason is that now the information is so much more prevalent and available, but there's also so much misinformation and people who don't know what they're talking about, putting out stuff and saying, look at me, I'm so spiritual, and they're putting themselves out as teachers, and they're providing information that's false, or faulty at best. And whereas when I was growing up, the information was much harder to come by. You had to go to the library. You picked out books from this very small section in the books, and the library, the librarian would give you dirty looks because you're like looking in this section. And then, you would quietly cut the little piece of paper out of the back of the books you bought, not the library books. And you would have to mail off this little piece of paper in the back of the book to get a copy of the tape series that they had, the cassette tapes. And you'd wait 6 weeks for the cassette tapes to come in, and then you'd have to sit and listen to them in your house on your tape player. And it was so much harder to get the information and so much slower. But you knew that when you invested in it, it was somebody who knew what they were talking about. And so I think in a lot of ways, I kind of prefer that to what's happening today, because especially with AI does not discern the difference between good information and bad. And so what it does is it says, well, there's 30 websites that say this, therefore it must be right, and it propagates the bad information. I was asked to give a quote about doing some clearing work, and the person who was the journalist said, well, and how you smudge with bay leaf. And I was like, please don't smudge with bay leaf. Bay leaf is toxic if you burn it. And she had seen a smudge pot and had assumed that that was smudge, which is not the same thing. A smudge pot is a wet mixture, and smudge is a dry mixture. And she had assumed you could smudge, and I'm like, I was like, please don't put that in there, right? But that's what happens, is that people who don't understand everything start sharing it, and then it gets twisted or it gets misinformed by accident. I don't think a lot of people are doing this on purpose. I think that they just don't know. I mean, I moved to Richmond in 2018. And I walked into a community that was super excited about spirituality. They were all about it, but they were all beginners. And it was the blind leading the blind. And I would walk into these spaces and they would say things, and I'm like, okay, no, I have to fix that. They're reading from their notes that they took in a class that they didn't fully understand. And so, just that sort of thing. And it's all with good intention. It's just that they just don't know enough to know that they're saying it wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And so, in a lot of cases, who cares, right? It's not a big deal if they get this slightly off or that slightly off, but sometimes it matters. If you do a meditation that you heard somewhere else and you take it from being, I want you to call back a piece of yourself that got lost, and instead you say, I want you to call back every piece of yourself that got lost. That's a huge difference. That's the difference between letting somebody have a single small piece of healing that they can easily integrate on their own and doing massive damage to every person in the room who took the instructions and actually did them as you said, because everything that you left behind, every piece of you that you left behind is holding trauma. You call all of those back together at once, you're going to be inundated with mass trauma. And and no integration, and these are things that have happened, right? These are places that I've been in, things that have happened. So, when you're doing things that you don't understand, then, there's potential damage that can be done, not just to you, but to the people who are listening to you.
Yeah, I think there's also so much that people don't know who to believe in the end, because is yes. What this one's saying right, or is what this one's saying right? And how do they discern?
Yeah, so the discernment is the hard part, right? Oftentimes you can't tell the difference until you do something that whacks you in the head. And, I wish I could tell you something better than that, but I can tell you that there are red flags. So there are two places that people teach from. Okay. Some people will teach in stage 3, which is what we were talking about, the consuming information and deciding whether or not you can do it. And almost every spiritual teacher out there has taught at stage 3 at some point. Okay. So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that these are terrible people. I taught when I was in stage 3. Every teacher I know was taught when they were in stage 3. But stage 3 teachers are teaching out of ego. They are teaching to prove to themselves that they know what they're talking about, and they're desperately afraid that somebody's going to ask a question they don't know the answer to, and they're often in hierarchical sorts of design, right? So if you have a teacher that's in like, I am the guru and you are the student, da, 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 that's generally a stage 3 teacher, okay? And can you learn from a stage 3 teacher? You can, but you have to be careful because their ego is involved, right? And they're in their personal process of evolution, and this is just one of the more challenging stages, right? So if they are saying, look at me, I've got so many followers, if they are saying, look at me, I'm so spiritual, if they are saying, I am the only path to spiritual evolution, if they are saying, if you don't follow me, then these horrible things will happen to you, all of those, so anything manipulative in any way, shape, or form, that's a stage 3 teacher, and they're more likely to do damage to you in the long run than if you work with people. So stage 4 is going and retreating to do your own work. And then stage 5 is you surrender to the universe, and generally people start coming back to teaching at that stage 5, stage 6, somewhere around there. And so ideally you want the person who's at stage 5, stage 6 or beyond to work with, because then you don't have the risk of them coming at your face and attacking you and things like that. If you talk to one of their students who is no longer with them, that's generally a good indicator. If the students still say nice things about them when they're no longer working with them, then you've got a good teacher. If they don't, then stay away. Right? So that's the closest I can give you.
Yeah, I like that. Because I think a lot of people that are these gurus will put fear into you. And that's the same way religion works, right? Don't worship other gods, don't do this, don't ask questions. Yeah. And I actually had a teacher like that who said, after doing work with me, you never have to do any work again. This is like the pinnacle of everything. And that is actually what got me worried. Because the more I learned, the more I realized I don't know anything.
Right. Yes. That is very true. People ask me, I've been doing this stuff for 50 years and people still ask me questions about things I've never heard of. And I'm like, what's that? I don't know. But that's true. But fear is a huge indicator of that. How? Now, I'm going to say that with a caveat, because magic is inherently dangerous if you don't know what you're doing with it. And so, you can mess it up. And will it kill you? No, I messed it up so many times. Okay. I'm not going to say it's going to kill you. It's not going to kill you. It's just going to hurt. Okay. And I blew myself up more times than I can tell you because I don't listen. And I'm just stubborn. And many of my students don't listen to what I tell them, and they blow themselves up. And I'm like, look, I will fix you. I will say I told you so while I did it because I told you not to do it. But I will fix you and I will make it better. But, so yes, there are caveats to that. There are things to be cautious of, and there are ways to blow yourself up, and, all of this stuff. Can you muddle your way through? Absolutely, I did. I had a bunch of teachers, but nobody did a comprehensive process with me. I learned a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, and I've just put it all together, which is what everybody does, right? And I've just happened to have longer to put it together than the average person because I started so much earlier, right? And in fact, that was really funny because when I started my podcast back in 2018, about 3 months into the podcast, my friends were, why do you love my podcast? Why are you even listening to my podcast? It's a beginner's podcast. And they were like, no. You are taking every 2-hour class I've ever taken and stitching it together into a big world picture. And I was like, I am? I had no idea I was doing that, but that's how it works in my head. So it makes sense. But I was unaware. In fact, I changed the subtitle of the podcast from the beginner's guide to your guide after that, because I understood that, more advanced practitioners were getting benefits out of it, and which I hadn't expected,
Well, it's like, it's different viewpoints that kind of paint the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
I'm a big believer in multiple viewpoints. Yeah.
I mean, I had a a boyfriend who said to me once, "You always read so many books and it's always on the same topic. How much more do you need to learn?" And I said, because if I can just get one concept from this book that I didn't really get, it just lands, it just fully rounds it off. It makes it more. And that's why it's so important to keep reading.
Yeah. And consuming, different things. I mean, I actually got a big thing that you wouldn't think would be a big aha. I'm 50 years into this practice, right? And I ran into Bashar, who is a channeler on TikTok. And he was doing a session and he was saying something about, now, I know about the eternal moment of now. I know about it. I know that everything is happening all at once. I know that. And yet he put together two things that I just had never actually thought about together. And so he's like, well, so when you're manifesting, you think, well, this thing has to come to you, but you're actually in the eternal moment of now. So, it's really not that much. It's just things just slightly rearrange around you. And I was like, oh, right. I had a moment. Now, that logically, that makes perfect sense to me based on what I know to be true and what I have known to be true for my whole life. But my brain just didn't put those two things together. That's why it's valid to be watching other people and reading other books and getting different perspectives. I've often said that the best gift you can give a shaman is a new perspective because it changes everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Sid Banks?
No.
He wrote a book. He's actually passed on now, but it's called the 3 Ps. It's the 3 principles. Can't remember what they stand for, but he had one of these spontaneous enlightened moments. And he decided to leave work after 30 years of working, doing a blue-collar job. He decided he's going to a guru conference. And they were like, what on earth are you going to do there? And he said he came back from there and those gurus didn't know what they were talking about. He said they don't know what they're on. Anyway, I think he had a walk-in. I'm sure that's what happened because he just had this like total download and he was a different person after that day.
Yeah, that sounds valid. I have had personal experiences of people who have had walk-ins and they're very different. Their field is not human anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I've interviewed a couple of people like that, and it's just like they do have memories of their earlier life, but it's almost like they had to relearn who they were supposed to be. They had to say, oh, yeah, this is my friend, this is my parents, this is the person that I created.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about spiritual awakening.
Okay.
So what happens after spiritual awakening for people generally?
So what's interesting is that spiritual awakening back 20 years ago was basically people going, I think I might be able to talk to my guides, or I want to learn how to be psychic, or there might be a ghost in my house or something like that. It was very small stuff, right around, it was like around the edges. I'd see things out of the corner of my eye. I woke up in the middle of the night and smelled my grandfather's pipe or, whatever, right? Today, people are waking up so much further along the path than they ever have been before. So like I'm having people show up who are saying, I am having these incredible experiences where I'm going forward in time and I'm seeing things and then I come back and then that moment happens like 3 weeks later and it's in vivid detail and I had 4 hours of deja vu and then I've over here I'm hearing voices and I'm not crazy. I've been to the therapist and I'm not crazy, but I think I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy, right? That's that. And so it's like there's so much further along and they have no vocabulary to describe what they're experiencing. They're like, my body feels weird. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, okay, can I come take a look at your energy field? Yes. It's like, oh, okay. So you had some sort of major movement in your energy field and you are twisted in your body. Your spirit is twisted in your body and you're not grounded and let me just sort of shove that back together again for you, funk, right? But they don't have language to describe what happened. And what happened was they had an awakening and it just threw things awry and asunder, right? It's just like, it was weird. So, how it happens today is very different than it happened 20 years ago. And so, they have an awakening and then they go into panic because they don't know what's going on and they feel out of control and they don't have they don't have vocabulary to describe it. They don't have a sense of how to operate within this new reality. And they come looking for someone to help them orient. And that's really the key, right? So learning how to work in the spiritual realm is the equivalent to moving to a new country. And I say this because I moved to Panama a couple of years ago, right? And so, everything is kind of the same, but totally different, right? You don't know what the names of the stores are. You don't know where anything is. The language is different. You kind of have a sense of from the body language of what's going on, but if you don't speak the language, you're kind of clueless and you're just making do with what you got, but you don't know if you're in a good place or a bad place except through what your body tells you, and you're just kind of lost, right? And it's exhausting because there's no respite from it, right? While you're there. And so it's a similar thing when you step onto the astral. So when you're on the astral, the average person on the astral is sort of like a shadowy figure because they're not really fully there. They're just sort of indications of people walking by on the astral, right? And so when you start to become conscious, your figure on the astral becomes light. You become real on the astral and you cease to be shadow. And that attracts attention. And so the attention that it gets attracted by entities that are neutral to you, by entities that mean you well, and by entities that mean you ill, right? It just like in real life, you can be noticed by any type of person, right? This is not, don't make it bigger than it is. It's just like real life, right? And so a lot of it is about learning how to navigate that area. What is this space here and how do I move to that space there, and what do these different things do and how do they operate, which is more complicated than moving to another country because the astral doesn't, in the astral, physics don't exist. And so it's not just, I don't know what the name of the store is and where it is. It's the store is a morphic field in a different dimension, in another universe. And it isn't actually a store. It's a manifestation depot. And, it gets more complicated, right? Because the rules don't exist. The rules are whatever you can imagine, right? And so we are inherently often limited, especially in the beginning of our work on the astral, by our assumptions about reality and physics. And that's the hardest thing to undo when you start doing energy work at the astral is undoing your assumptions about reality. And so that you can operate at a more bionic level, right?
Would that be fear motivated? Because if everything is possible, then there's no boundaries, there's no containment. So are you safe there? You know what I mean?
Are you safe anywhere?
Yeah.
Ultimately, we are infinite souls who do not die. We are playing in this lovely virtual reality game called Earth. And, when we're done here, we will go somewhere else, right? Or maybe we'll come back, but we will not be here for a while and then we will come back, right? So we'll be somewhere else. And so, the idea of safety is not something that exists within the spiritual realm because safety is a function of survival. And survival doesn't make any sense when you're infinite and unending. And so, the short answer is no, you're not safe because safety isn't relevant, and things can happen that may be unpleasant, There are also amazing things that can happen that are really cool and transcendent and blow your brain in good ways. But I mean, safety is kind of a nonsensical word in that world.
So, well, safety would be from an ego perspective. Like if I let go of the belief that I have about who I am in the world to become anything possible, then the ego would say, well, then I'm going to die.
Right.
That's not safe. So we need to hold on to this construct of who we believe we are. And I mean, to me, enlightenment is not becoming somebody else. It's remembering who you are. It's actually removing all the layers of who you're not.
Yes. A friend of mine has a beautiful metaphor for this, and I think you're really going to love. What she says is that we are all artisanal wells, springs that spring forth from the ground in infinite supply. And that over the course of our lives, garbage gets thrown into the well. And eventually enough garbage gets thrown into the well that the well stops springing forth water and it just is still. And then more garbage gets added in and it starts to weigh it down and then it rains. And now we think that we are the rainwater because that's what's in the well that we can see. And so we feel limited because the rainwater sometimes evaporates, sometimes there's more. And so we're like, well, I never know if I have enough and da, 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 da. And the fact is we are not the rainwater. We are the spring that is underneath the garbage. And that is why we do our work, is to clear the garbage out so that we can bring forth the spring again, right? And I've always loved that metaphor. It's so beautiful and it's so indicative of everything.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can actually see the water getting clearer and clearer and clearer, which is what would happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I love your idea about the ego defensive thing because that's, shamanic death is the killing off of the ego so that you can become the next evolution of yourself. And so, when you say that to me, I'm like, oh, yeah. I kill myself off all the time. All the time. It's like, this is never ending cycle, People are like, aren't you done? I'm like, no, not done.
No.
If your teacher says I'm fully enlightened and I'm done and I'm no longer doing my work, that's probably a red flag too. Just so you know.
Yeah. I actually look forward to work. Like I have a box of tissues in every table in my house because
me too.
crying is my second pastime.
See?
You see? You've mentioned that there are 100,000 people here that are helping to up-level the planet.
Yeah.
Is that growing? Or is there light growing?
So
and if there are, let's go there first.
Go ahead, ask the question because it's a big answer. So I'll build it in. So
So I was going to say, for those people who feel that they're called to be being part of that mission, what should they be doing? What should they be looking at?
Okay. So the short answer is there's 100,000 people here at this time on the planet whose sole purpose is to help transition the planet. And we are mid-planet transition right now. I was talking with a Vedic astrologer on LinkedIn, actually, of all places, a couple of days ago. And he was talking about how all of the planets aligned back in the end of January, which we know. But what he was saying is that they're also all transitioning to new signs right now. And that's why we're feeling like the foundation is shifting under our feet. And why we're having a hard time grounding into our bodies and staying present, and because everything is changing, right? And what's happening right now, and you'll see this as you look online, there are people out there who are preaching doom and gloom. They're like, oh, we're going to have this massive solar flare. It's going to knock out all the power. We're going to go into survival mode. We're not going to have enough food. Everybody's got to prep and be defending themselves and blah, blah, blah. And World War III and blah, blah. And I'm just like, that is so not what I'm seeing, right? And, what I'm seeing is there's a time of great upheaval and great chaos, followed by 1,000 years of peace. And do I see the flashover come from the sun? Yes, I do. I don't see it as gamma radiation, though. I see it as an energy field that is up-leveling us as humans. And those who are ready for the up-leveling will come up into this different layer of reality and have this is the timeline split that we're talking about that's going to be happening, that's actually happening right now. And that's going to be the thing that brings the people into alignment, and that's waking people up faster and faster. And I've seen this really growing dramatically since about 2016. And more and more people were waking up faster and faster, and it's just accelerating as we go. And so, what the first thing to remember, if you are clear that you're one of the 100,000, is that every person, including me, wakes up, and for me this was 25 years ago, wakes up and goes, "Oh my God, I've got this huge mission I have to accomplish. It's massive. I don't know how to do it. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, but I know I'm late," right? And I don't think I can do it, but I have to, right? So the first thing I'm going to say, don't panic. Okay, you're right on time. You're not late. Okay, that is not, it's not a problem, right? The second thing is to recognize that the huge mission is not just yours. You are a cog in a very big machine, and that's why there's 100,000 of us on the planet doing this. And your job is to do what you feel called to do. Your calling, your personal calling, is your mission. And so whatever it is that is in your heart of hearts to do, that's what you should do, because that's your piece to play. And so, don't worry about, unless you are a community builder and that's your thing, don't worry about trying to organize and get everything, Don't get into your head about it. This isn't about a head-based space, right? This is about, what are you inspired to do? Like, I have spent the last 20 years teaching people empowerment and spiritual practices. And I have been intensely involved in optimizing that process and taking what took me 25 years and optimizing it down to a 2.5-year process for everybody who comes behind me, so that I could get people in and get them going. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, yep, I'm good. I don't have to teach that anymore. It's not that I don't think it's valuable. It is absolutely valuable, but I'm no longer pushed to do that now. And now I'm feeling inspired to work more with entrepreneurs and to bring this work into the business world, and to do this work not just with spiritual practitioners, but also with entrepreneurs who have a spiritual side to themselves, right? Doing other businesses. And that's where my calling is taking me. And I have faith that that's where I'm supposed to be, in the big cog of the machine. I am still shepherding people who are spiritual practitioners, because they're finding me, and I'm happy to work with them at that level. But my focus has been expanded. And 2 years ago, I took a class on how to do mergers and acquisitions because I felt inspired to do it. I don't know why. I have no idea why I did that, but it was a year-long program and I was in it, and I really got into it. I don't know why, but it'll come to fruition soon, right? You do what you feel called to do, what you feel is important for you to do, and you follow it, and don't worry about the why. You don't have to understand the big picture. That's not your job. That's the universe's job. And this is coming from the person who has put the big picture together for a ton of people for a lot of time. But, at this stage of my life, I'm very much about following where my intuition takes me. We moved here to Panama 2.5 years ago because I couldn't be in the energy of the US anymore. I was like, I have to go. And, it took us a while to find where we were supposed to be. We spent a couple of years looking for it, and then picked Panama. And then we arrived sight unseen. We sold everything we owned and arrived with 6 suitcases and the dog. And people are like, well, what if you hate it? You've never been there. I'm like, we have 6 suitcases and the dog. How hard could it be to move again? Right? It's not like it's going to be difficult. So, that's the piece of the puzzle, right? So you just have to stay with what you feel is your inspired action is, and go where your guides take you. And even if they're telling you something that makes you say, you want me to do what? I actually went on Walkabout in 2002, and that's the title of my blog about it is, you want me to do what? Because that's how it is when you surrender to the universe, is they tell you to do some weird stuff, man. And you're just like, okay. And it always seems to work out. So there it is.
I love that because I also help entrepreneurs, and there are people that say you must make the money and forget about your passion. Just then you can pursue your passion, but you should just be working, grinding. And I don't believe that at all. I think if you're going to be spending your entire waking life doing something, it's got to be something you love, because it'll benefit everybody. It's got that ripple effect. It won't benefit your clients, your boss, your co-workers, whoever, if you're hating what you're doing, just so that you can fill up your coffers. It just, like, to me, it just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't sound right, ever.
Well, it's always funny to me because I have been doing this work for so long at this point. People always are asking me, because now I'm 55, right? And so they're just like, well, what about retirement? I live in Boquete, Panama, which is 90% of the people here who are expats are people who are retired. And so people are saying, well, when are you going to retire? And I was like, why would I retire? Like, I don't see any reason to retire. I've been living a retired lifestyle for the last 25 years. I work when I want. I don't work when I don't want. I take as much time off as I want. I'm doing what I love on a daily basis. How do I need to retire from that? And this is the thing of work hard so that you can enjoy your life. And I'm like, well, how about you just enjoy your life and find a way to support that?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a big fan of now, because, tomorrow is not promised. So, I'm all about let's do it now. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Love it. So tell us about your book.
So my book is called The Overachiever's Guide to Spiritual Awakening. And the stages of evolution are included in that, and there are 11 stages that are listed in the book. And there's also, so I did a series of over 3,000 energy reviews, where I'm like looking at people's chakra system and that. And in the course of doing 3,000 plus energy reviews for people on a spiritual path, I found I think it's like 38 or 40 common blocks that everybody has some of. Nobody has all of them, but everybody has some of them. And so those are listed there, as well as, where they come from and what some starter healing tips are for getting through those, and, spiritual traps that show up. It's basically a 30,000 foot overview of what it takes to evolve and grow and awaken as a human.
Sounds amazing. And where can people get hold of it?
The best place is on my website. So you can go to kellesparta.com and you'll find it on the website there. If you join the mailing list, you'll immediately, you'll get an email that's like, hey, here's my book is in every newsletter you get. It's at the bottom of the newsletter every time. But the newsletter includes like interviews like this and all of the podcasts that I do and videos I make about, like I did a video on TikTok yesterday or the day before about how to heal emotionally. And so you get stuff like that. So that's what the newsletter is all about. Yeah. So it's good.
So would they be able to get hold of you on your website, or where else would they be able to get hold of you?
Yeah, they can absolutely get hold of me on my website, or you can just reach out to Kelle at kellesparta.com, spelled like you see it on the screen, Kelle. There's also, and here's what I would highly recommend. On my website, if you click on the blog button at the top of the page, on the right-hand side, you will find a program called Boundaries for Empaths. That is free. I give that away because it was gifted to me, and it was one of the most brilliant things I've ever learned in my life, and it will change your life if you are an empath. It shows you how to change the way you hold your energy field so that you are not run over by other people's strong emotions, so that you can be in large crowds without having to get overwhelmed, so that you can break up with people instead of feeling like you have to go back over and over, so that you don't get called intimidating all the time if you're a strong personality, so that all of this, so that you know how you feel when people feel feel strongly, and sometimes you don't when you're an empath, right? And so that you can feel safe energetically. So you're not constantly having other people invading your energy field. And so that one is a free gift to you. Please sign up for it. It is amazing. And so let me just say this too. If you sign up for it, you should actually open it. Okay, because we do this. We sign up and we think, oh, I'll go back and do it. Then don't just when you sign up for it, do it while you can open it and actually do it. It takes like 10 minutes to read the PDF. And then there's a coaching call on their audio that's like 38 minutes long. So the max you need is an hour to do the whole thing. And then you'll have it and you'll know how to do it, because I don't want you to miss out. It's so valuable.
I'll have that. I'll download that as well.
I would love that. Yes.
I've actually had a lot of people asking me how do we protect ourselves from narcissistic in-laws, or when they come to visit. And it's all about the energy field. It's not about actually what you say, it's about how your body is. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's very much about your energy field and about your boundaries and about your willingness to walk away.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff around feeling trapped that happens when you go back into old family dynamics. And to remember that you are no longer a child and you have the ability to leave or throw them out. So those are also options, right? But that's, again, there's a lot of conflict avoidance that happens in the people who have those types of family. And so that's another layer of the work that needs to be done is being willing to stand in conflict and not do people-pleasing communication and things like that.
On that note, I have a theory, is when you are with a toxic person, they assimilate your energy because that's how they survive. And if they assimilate your energy, they assimilate you into their energy field, because initially they feel like this person who loves you and dotes on you. So they kind of like pull you in. And when you're pulled away from them, you don't have that energy field protecting you anymore, protecting you. And so you feel off kilter because you've lost everything. They've taken all that energy, which wasn't theirs to take. Do you think that's what happens? Because that's the way I kind of see it. It's like you're in this big bubble, which is them and you're inside of it. And when you're out of it, you're nothing.
So as an empath, so you will hear in the energetic world that people are cording to one another and that they're creating energy cords as the relationship connectors. Empaths don't cord. Empaths blend their energy field with other people. And because they're blending their energy fields, they are losing a sense of self in any relationship. And when you have a dominant personality within that relationship who is overpowering, then that becomes its own, it amplifies the problem. Let's just say that. And what I have seen, and I can see how you're saying this, and I'm going to say it a little differently, but I think we're saying the same thing. What I see is, yes, they merge their energy field with the person. And then the person, so they start off with love bombing, and that causes the empath to come into union energetically because they feel safe and they feel loved and they feel appreciated. And so they come in and they have trust patterns of a child, which is a child's trust pattern is, I'm going to give myself over to you and trust you to take care of me. And I expect you to do the same. And then they do that, but the other person doesn't do it back. And then they're out of balance in the dynamic. And then they go into a childlike state, which makes them give over their power to the person as their final gift of love. And before they go into a survival state. And so they've handed over their power. They've blended their energy. They've handed over the responsibility for their own well-being. There's nothing left to give. And so when they try to leave, because they don't know how to filter their energy back out, because they don't know how to take their power back, and they don't realize that they don't have to fight for their power, that their power is theirs if they just claim it. But they feel like they have to fight for it, and the other person's never given that up. And all of it because of that, and taking on back on responsibility for their own well-being, which they never really wanted to hold in the first place because they never got their needs met as a child in most cases. And so they're really looking for somebody to take on that pattern for them. And so, when they go to leave, all of these things are left behind and they feel bereft. There's like nothing left of them. And so I think in a lot of ways we're saying the same things. I'm just saying it a little differently. But yeah, I do agree with you. And so then it's about filtering your energy out of the other person's energy field. And it's about taking your power back and about taking on responsibility for your own well-being, which a lot of people have I had a lot of resistance to that when I was going through my process. I was like, no, I want someone to take care of me, because I grew up taking care of my mom, right? And I was like, this is not okay. I'm not fair, right? And so, there's a lot of, childlike stomping up and down and try, temper tantrum. So, yes, I agree that is absolutely a thing. I think I just wanted to say it a little differently.
I like that. I also like the way that you explain that the cord isn't really there, because you could do cord cutting, but it doesn't seem like anything's actually working. But you're right. If you're totally blended, you don't even know what's you and what's the other person. So how are you going to cut cords?
Yeah, there's no cord to cut because you never corded in the first place. People who have good boundaries, they cord because they're like, okay, so this is the edge of me and that's the edge of you, and we're going to make a little connection between us, and that's going to represent our relationship. And there may be one or two or three or more cords, but empaths have terrible boundaries. Our energy fields are everywhere, and so therefore we're used to just mixing our energy fields with the people that we love. And this allows us to monitor them and them to monitor us. And so we always know what's going on. And so there's a lot of benefit to it, but there's also a lot of downside to it. So, I have excellent boundaries with people I'm not tight with, I'm not super close with. But my husband and I mix energy fields because that's what works. And, therefore, he knows when I'm thinking something, he picks up on it. And when he's thinking something, I pick up on it. And we're just reading each other's minds all the time because we're sharing an energy field. And that works for us. But, I wouldn't do that with anybody else. Right.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Thank you. That was very inspiring talk, sharing your story. And I really think that a lot of people will benefit from this. Before we go, do you have a message for our viewers?
Don't buy into the fear. There's a lot of fear mongering happening right now, and it's designed to manipulate you and control you and to keep you out of your power. There are psychological studies that have proven that when we are in fear, we are 10 points of IQ dumber. We lose 10 points of IQ because of the fear. And so it is crucially important that you stay out of fear. And so we talked about this in the beginning about, look at the worst case scenario, make a plan. This is how you get out of fear, right? What's the worst that could happen? Make a plan for it, because it's not the fear that we're afraid of. It is the fear that we won't know what to do if the thing happens. It's not the thing itself. So if you have a plan, then you know what you'll do, and then let it go. Do not chew on it forever, right? Just the minute you have the plan, you let it go. I've got a plan. And then when the worry comes back up, you go, nope, got a plan for that. We're not thinking about that right now. And just move on, because the more you can stay out of fear, and the fear is being mongered on both sides of the equation, especially in the US. Okay. So I want to talk to the US listeners for a minute. There's propaganda on both sides of the aisle, and it's all designed to keep us divided. Because when we're divided, we are weak. When we are together, we're strong. And so the more you can do to cross the divide, the more you can do to stay out of the fear and the anger and the righteousness. The righteousness, oh my gosh. Righteousness is victimhood. If you are feeling righteous, you are feeling victimized. Get out of your victim self and pull your power back. Ask yourself where your power is and take it back. Because the more you stay in your power, the more you see what's behind the things, right? Because in a lot of the world right now, it's a battle between the haves and the have-nots. And they're trying to split the have-nots to think that it's about fighting each other. And the have-nots are missing the point of the battle. And so, there's, and I say battle because that's how the haves are thinking of it, but that's not how you fix it, right? So you don't fix it by engaging the battle, because the battle is about victim and not victim. It's about win and lose. And we don't solve the problem of this battle by doing that. We solve the problem by bringing everyone together, including the haves, right? So don't change your perspective and say, oh, well, they're dividing us and therefore we need to be, eat the rich, right? You don't want to do that, because one, that's going to limit your sense of what is right for you to have. If you are like eat the rich, then you can't be rich, right? So we don't want to do that, for one, because I want the power in the hands of the spiritual people. And that means that you guys need to have money. So do not be angry at the rich people, okay? They are lost. If they are in this place where they're feeling like they have to push somebody down, they're lost. They're in their ego. They just need to be allowed to evolve into the light. And the more they're in their defensive place, the less that's going to happen, right? So it's not about overthrowing the government or overthrowing the billionaires or overthrowing the other side. All of that's just illusion. It is not reality. Reality is we are all one. That is truth with a capital T. We are all one. Any battle between us is illusion, because we all exist as the same being. And so to remember that and to come back to that and to hold that clearly in your beingness at the core of your soul, to know that every person you look at is part of you. Everything you look at is part of you. Every planetary creature, every rock and stone and pebble, it's all you. When you can understand that, and when enough of us hold that vision for long enough, everything else will crumble. All of this illusion of distance and separateness and us versus them, and all of it will just disappear as we hold the vision together. So that's what I would say to you. Stay out of the fear, stay out of the us versus them, whatever level it's on. Stay out of that and stay with, we are all one. And love everyone as you love yourself, preferably more, because most of us need work on that. But you be with that knowledge, because if enough of us, there's a tipping point, right? And it's not a big tipping point. But there's a tipping point that if enough people hold that vision and are standing in that energy, the rest must crumble. The rest must entrain into that energy. So when you have a dominant energy field that's happening in around you, you only have so long that you can resist before you will crumble to that. And that's one of the reasons why I had to get out of the US. It's because the dominant energy was so toxic. And I was defending and defending and defending. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And so I pulled myself out of it so that I could stay and hold this energy for everybody that I talk to, right? And so, you need to stay in this positive energy, because if you hold this energy for long enough, it's going to impact the other people, right? It's going to, there's no way it can't. And ultimately, everybody entrains into the dominant energy. And so the greatest act of rebellion right now is to claim oneness. Yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you. And yeah, I think our ultimate calling is to take the duality and integrate it into ourselves, because that is the ultimate illusion.
Yes.
It's integrating the shadow parts that are also ourselves and saying, can we coexist? And if we can, and I think that's actually the big experiment that's happening on, or that's why all the planets or all the beings are watching us, because it's never been done before.
Mm. And yet it kind of has, because we
Yes,
are
it
all one,
has.
right? Because we are all one, but
It
we're in the
has, and
VR
it's
game
already
of
happened.
duality, right? In the VR game of duality, it's not happened, but yeah.
Yes,
um yeah.
in this physical matter world, where
Yes.
it's about to happen, but
Yes.
yeah, it has happened over there on the other side. It just hasn't happened here yet.
Right.
Oh, that gets complicated. Okay, thank you so
Yes, it
much.
does.
I really enjoyed hearing you, learning from you. It was lovely. Maybe we can do another interview sometime, because you do a lot of other stuff as well. So that would be really cool. Yeah.
I would love that. This was great. This is really good conversation. I'd come back anytime.
Yeah, lovely. No, that'll be great. And I'm going to download that little that
The course.
boundaries,
Yeah.
because it's interesting. I also get a lot of people asking me about that, because I work with people who are in abusive relationships.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. So yeah, that's huge. Um, yeah. So the thing that I'm going to say to you is that the boundaries for empaths, when you do that with somebody who's in an actively abusive scenario, they're going to have a harder time with it, because it is meant as an active monitoring system to let them know when they have to run and hide. And so the the key is to recognize that they can use it, but when the person comes at them, they can pull back and not have to have the person in their field, which is hard to remember in the moment. But if you can learn to do it, it's actually super helpful. And it's helpful in the world in general. So I talk about that in the coaching call. So
Yeah.
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 I actually had a lady who did healing on me, and she said, because I pull my energy field in, people are actually coming closer to me, and because they can't feel me. So if I
Right.
don't want them to come closer, I need to actually push my energy out so that they feel like the boundary's there instead of right here. And I know I used to go to watch the movies with my husband. And if somebody, you know what happens in the movies? You could have an empty theater and they'll come and sit right in front of you. Why?
Yes.
Because they can. So of course a couple will come and sit in front of us, and I would just nudge my husband, and he would just blow out his energy field, and within 5 minutes they would move. I couldn't do
Yeah.
it, but he would do it, and they would move without fail. It's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep. Yeah, it's really funny, because there was a period of time in my life for about 3 months when I was in Boston, where I would get on the subway and I would be reading a book, right? I am not looking at anybody. I am not looking like, and this is New England, where you don't talk to people, okay? And inevitably somebody would walk up, sit down right next to me, and tell me their deepest, darkest secret in like 5 minutes. And they're like, I've never told anyone this before, but, and I'm like, okay. And then they would get up and leave. It was like I had Mother Confessor tattooed on my forehead for about 3 months of my life. I still don't know what that was about, but it was weird. It was happening everywhere.
You probably get a lot of people just feeling like they can share with you, like they'll feel safe to be
Yes.
able to share their story.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a lot of that. And part of it is because, when I was a kid, I was a military brat. And so we moved a lot. And so I learned how to adjust my energy field to whoever I was talking to, which made me a chameleon, which meant that I didn't know who I was. But I was very good at making people feel very comfortable with me very quickly, because if I didn't do that, I had no friends ever, because we were only ever someplace for like a year and a half, 2 years at most, right? And so part of that was because this was long enough ago that was definitely still active in my field. And, part of it now is, well, I would say all of it now is just that I hold this very non-judgmental space where I'm like, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me. I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm going to ask you if it's working for you, but I'm not going to judge you for it. You can tell me you've done horrible things and I'll be like, okay, where do we want to go now? So
Yeah.
it's that I think is the biggest thing for me, is that people don't feel judged and therefore they feel safe, because they judge themselves so much for everybody else that it's not necessary for me to judge them.
So would it be that because you're actually listening actively, it's not just,
That's it.
how many people say, how are you? And they don't want to hear how you are. They're just saying it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that to somebody like 3 days ago. I was like, how are you? And he said, fine. I'm like, just fine. Are you okay? And he was like, well, no, I'm okay. And I'm like, are you? Because the way you said fine, I'm not so sure. Are you sure you're okay? And he was just like, because I was listening. I was listening for the subtext and the energy and and the answer I got was not exactly fine, And it was just like,
well, he wasn't going to share it.
Yeah. He wasn't going to go there, but
you needed to have your book with you. My
clients are just like, oh God, I hate when you ask me how I am. Because I can't lie to you.
Oh, great.
Like, I'm just listening to the energetic answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy Panama. Enjoy the heat.
Yes. Thank you.
And
thanks for doing this. This was awesome. Had a great time.
All
right.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.